Hi, I'm flutist Trisha Craig, and welcome to your very first flute lesson. I'm excited to teach you the beginnings of playing the flute. There are 3 things I like to accomplish in the first lesson. 1, I like you to know the names of the parts of the flute. 2, I like you to know how to put it together, but then we're not going to use the whole thing today. I also like you to leave knowing how to get a great sound out of just the head joint part, and we'll get back to that in a minute. So let's open the flute case, shall we? So your flute case, you probably have buckles or something here. When you open your case, you want to make sure that you always open it up this way so that the parts aren't flopping around. So make sure you know where the top of your case is. It might have a label here, the brand name or something on a student flute, or some of the band instrument flutes that you might have even found in a closet somewhere. They usually have a case with buckles that open up, or just be careful to know how to open the case this way so that the flute stays firmly seated in its little spots so that it's safe. And once that's done, once you know how to open your flute case, and it sounds stupid, but sometimes that's a bigger challenge than you think. Let's just look at the parts. So if you look in your flute case, these parts are called the head joint. This piece is the head joint. This piece, the big one, is the body. And then what do you think the one that goes on the end is? So if the head joint goes on one end, and then the body, and then this piece goes down the other end. So pause the video for a second and guess. Write it down. What do you think that's called? So we have the head joint, the body, which isn't a joint, it's just a body, and then what do you have at the other side, the end? What do you have down there? So let's see what you guessed. Some people guess end joint, but that's not very fun. You got head, body, and end. It doesn't make sense. A lot of people guess the leg joint, and my favorite guess is the tail joint, but what it's actually called is the foot joint. So we have the head joint, the body, and the foot joint. We don't have a mouthpiece. All the other wind instruments have some sort of mouthpiece, well, except for the double reeds. Yes, they don't call that a mouthpiece either, but we just have the head joint. It doesn't go in our mouth. So there's that. These things are all called keys. Sometimes people are tempted to call them buttons, but the only instrument I know of that has buttons, can you guess, is the accordion. It has lots of buttons, and it's a really cool instrument. But we have keys. These are keys. And these things that hold the keys on, these are called rods. And this is the lip plate. This is called the crown on the top here, this little knobby thing, that's the crown. And actually inside, from the crown to about here, if you look in, you can see, where's the camera? You can see that metal wall at the top. That is attached to a cork, just like a wine bottle. There's a cork that goes right here. And the movement of that cork, the placement of that cork determines the length of the tubing. It's important to know that because sometimes, first of all, you don't want to be tempted to wiggle around and screw and unscrew the end cap. But you also, if you're having trouble with sound production or pitch, when you go to your repair person, you could remind them or ask them to check your cork. When you become a little more advanced, there are some great ways to be able to check your own cork, but I always have my repair person do my cork just to make sure. And it does have to be replaced every so often in there. If it's not snug enough, then the tone won't work. So there's a cork in there, just like a wine bottle cork. So that's the names of the parts: head joint, body, foot joint. And by the way, this weird little thing here, you don't have that. That's what I call my finger-majig. I smashed a knuckle years ago, and my brilliant flute repair dude built this for me so that I'm a little bit more ergonomic for my damaged hand. But when you look at your keys, mine have holes. Do you see the holes in the keys? And so yours might have that. This is called an open hold instrument because the holes are open. And then most beginner flutes have what's called a plateau key. So these holes are filled in like that. So If you have no holes, it's a little easier to figure out where your fingers go. When you do have holes, it's important that your finger pads, these fat pads, cover the holes cleanly so that they don't leak. We'll do that in the second lesson, but that's just the general gist of what's going on here. Now to put your flute together, and it's a little tricky to show you on the video, so I'm going to put the flute case in my lap flatly. Okay, keep it flat so the parts don't flop around. When you're putting your flute together, it's really important to consider two things. One, never grab the keys and mechanism. You never want to grab it and push them. Once you're twisting and pushing, you can really damage this stuff, and they're designed to be quite sort of delicate and properly placed. So you don't want to grab them. You don't want to bend anything. This little key tends to get bent all the time if you're not careful. So never grab like this. And the other thing is you want the metal tubing. In most cases, it's just some sort of alloy. It's not, the beginner flutes have just metal. I don't even know what it is. Nickel, I don't know. It varies. Mine is sterling silver. Other flutes are in platinum or gold. And, you know, by the time you get to a sterling silver instrument, or if you ever got a gold flute or a platinum flute, you just never want to damage the tubing. And so it's super important to learn early on proper care of your instrument so that when you get into a nicer one, you don't have bad habits that then destroy your $1,000,000 flute. So it's worth it to learn properly from the beginning. So here's what you do. You never want to hit metal on metal. If you heard a ping when you picked your head joint up to put it in, then that's the problem. I hold my body by the collar, this little area here. You hold it like this. That way you can grip pretty tight if you're holding it without touching the rods. So I hold it here, and I hold the head joint anywhere. And what you want to do, never put it in crooked and stand it up, because that will start to roll this edge. And the tubing should be pristine for the best sound production. Those sound waves bounce around down the length of the tubing, and if they're hitting weird dents and dings, then it's not going to work as well. So you want it to be pristine. So you put it in straight, and once you've got it lined up so that it's going in exactly straight, then you can push and twist. And when you first start, what I recommend is putting it in all the way, and you can't really see it on my head joint, but I pushed it in all the way, and then you back it out about, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch or so. The head joint's designed to go in not all the way, and that gives you some ability to control your pitch or to change the length of the tubing for intonation purposes down the road. So the head joint is not designed to go all the way in. So just to be sure, you can push it all the way in and then pull it out, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch or even 1/2 an inch. It doesn't really matter how much you pull it out when you're just starting. It's fine, but just don't keep it in all the way. Then the next thing to know is that the head joint, I'm going to use my glasses for this, but the head joint should be put on aligned properly so that all of the air waves, all the sound waves go the right way. The placement of the head joint is super important. So when you're putting your head joint on, what you want to do is you want to look at this tone hole. We call that the tone hole. That's where you're going to blow. And you look down like this. I'm going to take it a little further away, but you're going to look down the body of the flute. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to line up the center of this hole with the center of these inline keys. Now, very likely you have offset keys here. They might not be perfectly in line. That can come either way. So if you look at the inline keys, or if you look at the keys down this end here. Okay, so I like to look down here. And what I do is I look this way. I look at the center of the tone hole, and then I look at those bottom 3 keys, and I just eyeball it to line them up. You don't want to use your finger because this happens. Yeah, that's straight. It's never straight. So just use your eyeball, and you get used to it. You find the right spot, and you look at the tone hole and down at the end 3 keys in the tone hole and the end 3 keys in the tone. And eventually you can make sure that that line is straight. And then you'll know that your head joint is on properly. That's tricky. Then you're gonna add your foot joint. When I take the foot joint out of the case, again, you don't want to grab the keys. So I always pull it out by the end like this. And then when you're putting it on, I just grip it from the very end, and you get your flute body ready. And you, again, don't put it in crooked. Don't hear a ping. Don't do what I just did. Put it in straight, and then once it's in, you can push and twist. Sometimes the foot joints are a little bit moody. If you have a grave difficulty getting it on, then I would have your repair guy look at it, your repair person look at it, because they very likely could make an adjustment. But you could also make sure that this joint is clean. Just take a little alcohol swab or just a clean cloth and wipe that off, and also wipe off inside the joint, and then that should help. And if that still doesn't help, you could don't put anything on this. Don't put any added things on here. Nothing, no oil, nothing. But you could take your own little hand and rub the joint slightly, and that gives it just a little bit of lubrication that will help. So if you're really having a hard time with the foot joint, you could do that. But here's how I put my foot joint on, okay? And then the foot joint is designed to be adjustable for the size of your hand. So when you're just a beginner, a really good place to start is what I just did, which is to put this little ball lined up with the center of this key. And that's a good basic start. But your pinky is going to have to run all of these keys. Do you see that? It's a lot of work. It's kind of evil of the flute builders to have done that. But we have to be able to reach them. So, and you can see, like, if it's too high up, then my little fingers might come off the hole, and then that won't work. So if you're very big hands, if you have huge hands, then you will likely be more comfortable with this higher up, this way. I have very petite hands, so I often use it in the middle, but more than that, I put it just a little bit smaller. But it doesn't matter to get started. Just put it in the middle, and once you start taking full-on lessons, you'll figure out where the best spot is for your foot joint. But just in general, you line this ball up with the center of this key. Now your flute's all assembled. When you place it on something, you put it flat on a solid surface. So I recommend desks, shelves, dressers, tables. I always say to my students, never put your flute on the edge of a music stand, because someone, including you, because that will happen. It will fall on the floor. It will, even if you're careful. So just never do that. And I always say, never put your flute down, never put it keys down, because the keys will get damaged. And then never put it down where butts or feet go, because someone's butt or someone's foot will crush it. And it'll likely be yours, and it'll be an accident, but it'll get ruined. So be in the habit of placing your flute on a table or a desk. Right now I'm going to place it on my desk so that I can show you what to do with the head joint. So go ahead and take your head joint off. Okay, I'm putting my flute on my desk, keys up, and we're going to get a sound out of this thing. So the first thing to know is that the flute should be level to the floor. Let me clarify. The floor isn't the point, your lip is the point. So you want the flute to end up straight across on your lip. So right now my head is fairly straight, so my flute would be level to the floor. So that's a good way to start, is to be level to the floor or the ceiling, but not here because that's a triangular ceiling. So level to the floor, straight across. The way you're going to get a sound is you're going to blow, just blow. You don't even think too much about it, but the placement of the flute on your lip is the important part. So there are two things to consider. One, you want this hole to be face up, so everything's flat across. And when you put it to your face, this hole should be centered on your nose. Do you see that? Right in the middle, like this. Because then when you blow across, the goal is to hit this edge here. If you're over here, then you're going to get half your airstream. If you're over here, or if it's in a weird position, it won't work. So it should be flat to the ceiling and straight, centered on your nose. And the other big important thing is for this edge, the edge closest to you, to be right where your lip attaches to your face. That way, the muscle of your lip is all movable. If you end up on your lip a little bit, you can't move it. And so as you learn and get better at playing, you won't be able to have a flexible embouchure. The way you hold your mouth when you play a wind instrument is the embouchure. You won't be able to have a flexible embouchure if your lip is trapped, and then you'll have trouble with tone production and with with pitch, with intonation, and placement of notes. So you want to get in the habit of being right underneath that lip. So I do this, and I place it under there, and then I can feel this edge almost cutting right into where this lip attaches, like that. Get it right in there. So you can see it's centered on my nose and under the red part of my lip. And then you just take a deep breath, and a good way to breathe is to breathe all the way down into your hips. The muscles that help your breathing, the diaphragm in your lungs, your diaphragm is designed to push all that stuff out of the way so that your lungs can expand. So if you really expand down into your hips, then you will be getting a good air intake. So you inhale, and when you inhale, say ho backwards. If you say ha backwards or he backwards, you're restricting the air, and you're going to have trouble getting air out, and you won't get enough air in. So just be in the habit of saying ho backwards. And then you put your flute on here and just blow straight across, your aiming at this edge. Some people might get a high one. Either one's fine. The faster airspeed makes it go high. The slower airspeed keeps it low. And I always find that students are in one camp or the other when they first get a sound, and I say just go with it. Just go with it. So once you're getting a good consistent sound, you can just practice getting that sound out every day. And then when it's consistent, time it. So see how many seconds, put your stopwatch on or something, and see how many seconds you can hold that one note for, that tone. Do you see I did ho backwards? Okay, I'm not running out of air yet, so I won't bore you with that forever. But that's the point, is to really try to get your lungs to go past where they're comfortable. And in doing that, you're going to actually increase your lung capacity. And let me tell you one thing about lung capacity, and it's a secret little thing, and maybe someday you'll get to hear my story, but playing the flute saved my life, literally saved my life twice. So reach out. I'll tell you the stories. It's pretty cool and a little goofy. So then you can experiment. What else? So you can get the high one. That's pretty advanced. But just experiment with it and time your long tones. We call them long tones, and eventually you'll do them on your whole instrument. But for now, you just do them on your head joint. And then it's important to clean your flute out. I will teach you that in another lesson. But when you're putting it away, here's one important thing to keep in mind. I'm just going to take my flute apart really quickly. When you're putting the body back in the case, the body in particular, I want to show you. Everything kind of fits back in the case. Make sure you just know how it came out. But the body in particular, it's important that this key be in the center of the case when you put it away. See, it's in the center. And your case has a spot that protects that little key. So you just make sure that that key is protected, and you get everything back in your case. You probably can figure it out from there. It looks like a puzzle. And that's it. Then you put it away safely until tomorrow when you practice again. So that's your first lesson, and I hope I get a chance to answer any of your questions, to share my ridiculous stories about how playing the flute saved my life, and to take you on a journey to learn all kinds of great things on the instrument. Until next time, thank you for joining me, and it's time for you to go practice. I'll see you again soon.